The issues are much more important than her feelings. Okay, and you are asking these questions on behalf of the public, who demands to know the answers. This is serious, serious stuff. Go ahead.
Hello.
Hi.
How is Bahrain?
How are you doing?
I'm
We are
fine.
very well, and we are very happy actually these days because, you know, we are safe and there, unfortunately there are
Tourism's
troubles
good.
everywhere.
Well,
and
actually-
tourism in Bahrain is getting better. and
Well,
better.
actually, I have
It's
reports
very, very
between my hands that says the opposite. Actually, I have reports here saying that people in Bahrain were who did beaten, 5 prisons died, was murdered under torture, and female prisons were threatened with rape. This is a report from The Economist, November 26, 2011. Well, my question here, how can you justify using violence against your own Bahraini people?
We cannot justify, and we don't want to justify. And this is why we call, not
Who are you? Who we?
Khalifa.
I'm talking about Bahrain. I'm not talking about the person. I'm not talking about the King Khalifa. I'm talking about Bahrain. I'm talking about people here murdered. I'm not talking about. King Khalifa, and King Khalifa is not we.
Actually, King Khalifa is me. I'm sorry. King Khalifa is
Okay, so
the
what?
symbol of Bahrain, and we are all citizens and governments. We are very happy that King Khalifa is our king because he is really doing his best to make sure that this people
Doing his
is in
best
peace.
by murdering
And
people.
this is
By
what
murdering
King
his own
Khalifa
people?
did not murder anyone.
He did. His people did actually.
King Khalifa is protecting every single citizen in this country, and he did not murder anyone. When he heard that some violations have been going on in his prisons, he called for a committee.
Oh, actually,
King
maybe here he
Khalifa,
didn't.
Bahrain called for
I
a
think I should handle you my reports to give it to King Khalifa because obviously he didn't hear about what is happening in his prisons nowadays and 10 years ago actually. Well, let me ask you about women's right now in Bahrain. How can you talk and still talk about women's right in Bahrain where women are tortured and raped in prisons in Bahrain? How can you talk about women's right?
Before I tell you how Bahraini women are happy to gain all their rights, I have to comment on what you said about King Khalifa not knowing. King Khalifa knew, and we as officials in the government had to tell him that some violations are taking place. And
how
when
did
he
he
knew
act to
about
this?
that, as I told you 4 times till now in this interview, King Khalifa, once he knew about it, he said that we will not do our investigations. So he wants to be sure, 100% sure, that these investigations are independent. And this is why he called for an independent
What about the
committee
international
to
reports?
come
What about
and investigate.
what about the investigations of those people who hurt prisoners and women and took like what they said, what they lived in the prisons? What about this?
Do you want me to answer your question, or because you
Please.
asked me 2 questions? One about King Khalifa, and I'm telling you what he did. He is actually the one who called for an independent committee. He is the only ruler in the Gulf to call for an independent foreigner committee to come and see what's happening because he really wants to know what is going wrong in his country to protect his people. You asked me about the women in Bahrain. Women in Bahrain, can't you see that maybe it's like in Tunisia? Our women have all their rights. These are probably the 2 only countries in the Arab region where women have their rights.
Okay, all right. I'm gonna stop you there. The reason you allowed her to make all these general points is that you were asking her general questions. What about women's rights and rights? It's not a general question, it's take each of the facts in there and put them to her. These are not general accusations, these are very specific accusations. The moment you say there's a lot of international reports, she can say which reports. We need specific facts to go in front of her. The more specific your facts, the less she can go off into general arguments. If you said, how is Bahrain at the beginning? This is an invitation to give us a speech for half an hour about tourism in Bahrain.
Give her the opposite, like to start, like I'm gonna attack her because she's gonna say
So
Bahrain is
attack her
good,
straight
so-
away. So don't even let her say Bahrain is good. Go straight in. Why give her the chance to say Bahrain is great?
Okay. What about the women's right? Actually, this talk about the women's right. How can I ask her then about the women's right?
Why don't you ask her about the accusations made by the independent commission that women were threatened with rape? Why don't you go that specific?
Yeah.
Start with a specific. Don't start with a general point about women's rights. Here you've got a specific accusation, which was made by the independent commission, which they accepted. They accepted that report. So you shouldn't give her a chance to deny that women's rights are being violated because they've already admitted it. If you had asked a specific question, she wouldn't have been able to deny it. But you've got away from the facts. You started asking general questions. Stay with the text. It's all there. Don't be afraid to quote from the text. Do you ever see lawyers going into court without piles of paper? They all do. They all take piles of paper. You take piles of paper in. You take the evidence. Here, read it out to her. Read out what the UN Convention Against Torture said in 2005. Read it out. It's devastating. Asking her about women's rights is not devastating. This is devastating. When it goes in front of her. She's forced to answer. General things, she can go where she wants. Okay?
Right. Thank you.
Stay